The sea was glass that morning, flat silver, endless. It stretched out from the dock like a memory too wide to grasp, indifferent to time and gentle as breath. Luther Cain sat at the stern of his old wooden boat, the Evelyn May, his weathered hands resting on his knees. He didn't hum, didn't sigh, just sat. The name of the boat, painted in trembling but proud white letters, was all that moved, slightly rippling in the soft light as the tide eased under him. He was 81, and he needed very little now. A working motor, a dependable rod, and his thermos, dented but loyal, filled with coffee, brewed the way Evelyn used to make it. Strong, barely sweet, always warm by the time he reached the water. He carried no radio, no GPS, no fancy tech, only a laminated photo tucked in a canvas pouch, a pack of bait and folded flags in the same worn box he kept them in for years. It wasn't much, but it was what he had left. The sound came from the east, a low rumble at first, followed by the unmistakable churn of propellers. Luther turned slow and deliberate. A Coast Guard vessel, gray and angular, barreled toward him. The water around it boiled in froth. No other boats were nearby. No reason for urgency. No warning. Hands where we can see them, a voice barked through the loudspeaker, sharp, unfamiliar, commanding. Luther raised his hands, calm, steady. His knuckles were thick with age, the joints stiff from years of gripping rope steel and ghosts. He didn't flinch when the officers boarded. 3 of them. Young, nervous, faces taut with duty, but not understanding. One knocked over his tackle box. Another brushed his thermos aside with his boot. The 3rd Lieutenant, Gregory Shaw, stepped forward, clean-shaven and serious, with a badge that gleamed brighter than his judgment. "Sir, identify yourself," Shaw ordered. "My name's Luther Cain," he said, voice soft like a page being turned. "You always fish this close to the shipping lane?" Mr. Cain, another asked, already opening compartments, lifting cushions. "I fish where it's quiet," Luther replied, eyes steady. "Been doing it since you were learning to tie your shoes." Shaw didn't laugh. "Anonymous tip. Suspected arms trafficking. Coordinates match this location. We check every inch." They did, and they tore through everything. They opened a canvas pouch and found only spare hooks and the photograph. Evelyn, smiling in a blue dress, name faint at the bottom. One officer dropped it like it meant nothing. Luther saw. They found maps with edges curled like old bark pliers, rusted from years of salt air. In a metal box near the stern, they poked at a stack of folded American flags. "Funeral flags," Luther said. "Units I served with. Friends of mine. Some of those are older than you." They didn't stop. One found dog tags bound together with twine and a ribbon faded to sky gray. A sealed letter, addressed to May. "That's not for you," Luther said sharply when the young man opened it. Shaw hesitated, but protocol was stronger than decency. He nodded and the letter was folded, returned unread. "What exactly are you doing out here?" Mr. Cain, Shaw asked again, this time quieter. "I fish," Luther said. "Same spot, same time. I don't bother anyone." The wind shifted slightly. The sunlight warmed the back of Luther's neck. He bent to pick up one of the journals knocked loose. From it, a small bronze medal glinted, quiet, unspoken. Miles, the youngest, saw it. Lieutenant Shaw waved him off. Later. For 15 more minutes they searched, frustrated. The boat yielded only rust rope and stories none of them recognized. "Finally all clear, sir," one muttered. Shaw, uneasy, now reached for his radio. "Delta Patrol, 3 to base. Full search conducted. Suspect identified as Luther Cain, 81. Requesting full background check. Static." Then a pause. Luther returned to the bow, hands resting on the rail. Still, silent. Miles chuckled. "Bet he's got a record. Ex-con, or some desert drifter vet." Then the radio crackled. "Delta Patrol 3. This is base command. You are ordered to stand down immediately. I repeat, stand down. Cease all activity. Step away from Mr. Cain now." Shaw stiffened. "Say again, command." The voice returned slower, heavier. "Mr. Cain is Captain Luther. Cain, retired, former commander of SEAL Team 4, recipient of the Silver Star Navy Cross and 2 Purple Hearts. Confirmed extraction under fire Operation Urgent Fury, Grenada, 1983. Do not detain, do not question. Issue formal apology. Repeat issue formal apology. Silence fell, the kind that rearranges your understanding of the world. Shaw removed his cap. Captain Cain, he began, voice quiet now, steps reverent. Luther didn't turn. Told you, he said. I fish where it's quiet. Shaw looked down at the photo near his boot. Bent. Bait splattered across the edge. He picked it up and handed it back with both hands. Luther took it gently. You can go now, he said. And they did. Luther Cain was wrongly accused and aggressively searched by a Coast Guard unit, only for them to discover, too late, that he was a decorated Navy SEAL captain. The officers issued an apology, but the wound had already been cut. By sunrise the next day, the Evelyn May looked untouched, like no boots had scraped its planks. No fingers had rifled through its soul. Luther Cain stood on the dock, his breath mixing with the mist rising off the sea. He moved slowly, methodically, checked the fuel line, tightened the knots on the anchor rope, filled the bait bucket. Not a wasted step, not a glance behind him, but something about the way he handled each item, each latch, each tool, careful more than usual, betrayed the truth yesterday hadn't left. It clung to the joints, the corners, the silence. The photo of Evelyn, now relaminated and placed back into the pouch, lay near the helm. He had smoothed out the crease where an officer's boot had bent the corner. She looked out, still smiling, as if even her image refused to break. Her eyes reminded him what calm meant. But calm didn't mean unscarred. The folded flags had been rewrapped in fresh plastic. His fingers trembled more now when he touched them, not from age, but from what it cost to carry each one. Some belonged to men who never made it past 22. Men he'd pulled from fire and water and left behind anyway. Each triangle was a story the world didn't ask about anymore. He'd wiped down the thermos, polished the dent with a rag, and spit though the mark still remained. It sat beside him, again, upright, steady, like he intended. The morning passed without visitors. No voices called his name. No apology letter slid beneath his door. But he hadn't expected one. Most things, when broken by force, don't come with a receipt. It was nearly noon when the footsteps returned. Different this time, measured, hesitant, almost polite. Not the clipped march of uniformed authority, but the uneven rhythm of a man unsure of his welcome. Luther didn't turn. He knew already. Captain Cain. The words came soft. Not an order, a request. He looked over his shoulder. Lieutenant Gregory Shaw stood there, no uniform, no badge. Just a jacket that hadn't been ironed, boots that looked borrowed, and a face weighed down by something heavier than embarrassment. You again, Luther said, not cold, not warm, just there. Shaw nodded. Yes, sir. I know I don't deserve it, but he stopped. Took a breath. I needed to come. Luther turned fully now, hands still at his sides. What for my grandfather Shaw, began Calvin Shaw. Vietnam. Combat medic. Bronze Star. He used to say there were two kinds of soldiers. The loud ones who told their own stories and the quiet ones who carried everyone else's. Luther didn't speak. He'd have called you the second kind. The dock creaked between them, the only thing speaking for a few long seconds. I saw you as an old man on a wooden boat, Shaw continued. I assumed you were just that. And when you didn't fight back, I thought it meant you had something to hide. Luther's face remained still, but his eyes, sharp as ocean glass, did not blink. Shaw lowered his head. It wasn't protocol that failed. It was me. I saw only the surface. Luther turned away again, picked up a coiled rope, and began tightening it. It's easy to mistake quiet for guilt, he said. Shaw stepped closer. Then show me, he said, the words coming fast now, urgent but not loud. Let me learn. Let me do better. Luther paused. His hand still held the loop of rope. You want to come fishing? He asked flat. If you'll have me. Luther stared at the bow for a long beat. The extra rod Evelyn used still hung neatly on its hook. He gestured toward it. It still works, but you'll need to treat it right. Shaw nodded and climbed aboard, not as an officer, but as a guest. Careful, quiet, reverent, as though stepping into a story he had once tried to erase. They didn't speak much after that. Luther tied knots with the rhythm of a ritual. Shaw watched silent, the sea reflecting back a kind of peace he didn't recognize. No cameras, no reports, no medal ceremony. Just two men on a weathered boat, one trying to carry the past, the other trying to understand the weight. When they cast off from the dock, the Evelyn May groaned gently, like an old soul moving back into place. The sea received them without judgment. The world had tried to forget Luther Cain, but the sea it remembered. After wrongly accusing Luther Cain of trafficking, Lieutenant Shaw returned in civilian clothes to offer a quiet, sincere apology. Luther didn't offer forgiveness, but extended something harder to earn an invitation aboard the Evelyn May. The morning broke gently over the harbor, lavender and gold bleeding across the sky like watercolor on canvas. The Evelyn May drifted slowly from the dock, her engine humming low, like a voice too old to raise itself. The sea welcomed her like it always did, forgiving, without asking why. At the helm, Luther Cain stood steady, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly near his thermos. Beside him, Gregory Shaw sat rigid with unfamiliarity, holding Evelyn's fishing rod as if it were an heirloom rather than a tool. "You're gripping it too tight," Luther said. Shaw loosened his hand. "Sorry. No need to apologize," Luther replied, not looking at him. "Just don't strangle it. The rod ain't the enemy." They drifted farther into open water. The town behind them shrank into softened edges and faint outlines. It was quiet, not the silence of absence, but of presence, of something waiting to be understood. Luther dropped his line into the sea, the plunk sound quick and clean. Shaw fumbled with the reel, trying to mimic the same motion. "Not like that," Luther said calmly. "Twist the line once. Loop it back. Let it rest between your fingers, like it's alive." Shaw tried again. Slower, gentler, better. They cast their lines into the water. Then they waited. Time stretched. Not the kind measured by clocks, but the kind marked by breath and tide. Neither man spoke. The sea lapped gently against the hull. A gull called once overhead, then moved on. Shaw sat with the rod balanced across his knees, unsure if silence was a lesson or a punishment. Finally he asked, "What made you stay calm?" "Yesterday." Luther didn't answer right away. He reached for the thermos, unscrewed the lid, and took a slow sip. The steam curled upward before vanishing. "When you've seen the real kind of chaos," he said finally, "this isn't chaos. This is noise." Shaw turned to him, uncertain. "In Grenada," Luther continued, eyes locked on the horizon, "they dropped us in at night. Black sky jungle, like a mouth waiting to close. Couldn't tell if the next step would be our last. You learn to slow your breathing. You listen for the way trees hold their silence before it breaks." He reeled the line once, checked the tension. "So when 3 boys with clean uniforms and jumpy fingers boarded my boat, that wasn't danger. That was a ripple." Shaw looked down, shame in the crease of his shoulders. "I thought I was doing my job." "You were," Luther said. "Just the wrong job. On the wrong man." They both chuckled, soft, small. A release. Suddenly Shaw's rod twitched. "I think I've got something," he whispered. "Wait," Luther said, lifting a hand. "Feel it. Don't rush. Let the line talk to you." Shaw froze, breathing shallow. The rod bowed slightly. "There's a rhythm to everything," Luther murmured. "The fish, the water, even people." Shaw began to pull slow and even. The surface broke with a flicker of silver. A snapper, maybe a pound. "Young, too small," Luther said. "Let it go." "But I caught it, and now you give it back. If it survives, it'll feed more than just your pride." Shaw hesitated. Then with a quiet exhale, he unhooked the fish and lowered it into the sea. It vanished with a flick of its tail. "You know," Shaw said, voice hushed, "I always thought strength was about force, about being the loudest voice in the room." Luther leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Strength is holding the line when everything else wants to snap. When people kick your gear, read your name like it's a threat, or ask questions that strip your dignity." Shaw turned to him. "And you, what holds your line?" Luther didn't answer right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the laminated photo of Evelyn, her smile still unwavering. He placed it gently on the seat beside him, facing the water. "Her," he said softly. "Always her." The boat rocked gently as if leaning into the memory. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The sun hung low, brushing the water with soft amber streaks. The Evelyn May bobbed in rhythm with the waves' lines, now slack, the catch already forgotten. But what was gained couldn't be measured by weight or scale. It was earned. After a day of fishing aboard the Evelyn May, Lieutenant Shaw begins to understand the quiet dignity of Luther Cain. They speak little but share much. Shaw learns to wait, to listen, and to release. What began as an apology has become something deeper. The late light stretched across the water like a memory too stubborn to fade. It painted the waves in soft golds and tired blues, brushing gently against the sides of the Evelyn May. The boat rocked with a rhythm that seemed older than time itself. Luther Cain reeled in his line slowly, though nothing had bit in the last hour. He didn't mind. The sea had already given him what he came for. Beside him, Gregory Shaw sat in stillness. The rod lay across his lap untouched now, tip nodding gently in the breeze. His eyes weren't on the water anymore. They were fixed on the horizon where sea met sky in quiet agreement. "You ever feel," Shaw said finally, "like the sea remembers things for you?" Luther glanced sideways. "What do you mean?" Shaw shrugged, his voice low. "Just sitting here today. I've never been this quiet without feeling alone. This place, it doesn't feel empty. It feels like it knows." Luther gave a half smile, the kind that passed through the eyes more than the mouth. "That's because it does." He reached over and tapped the wooden rail beside him. "Built this boat with my own hands, every beam, every bolt. Evelyn helped paint her name on the side. We launched it on our 40th anniversary." Shaw looked at the faded white lettering on the hull, Evelyn May. The paint had chipped, the edges worn, but the name remained. "She used to say the sea was the only place where my mind stopped marching," Luther said. "So we made this boat our retreat. Just her, me, and the horizon." He leaned back, letting the sunset warm his face. "After she passed, the house was too quiet. But this out here, she's still close, and no one talks too loud." Shaw nodded, the silence wrapping around them like a shawl. "You think she saw what happened?" That day Luther didn't hesitate. She saw. She always sees. They fell quiet again, but it was a silence filled with portraits of dances in small kitchens, of folded letters, of shared coffee and fading laughter. A silence that knew how to carry weight without breaking. "Do you want people to know who you are?" Shaw asked after a time. "What you did?" Luther looked at him with eyes that had seen fire and water and the places in between. "I don't need people to remember me," he said. "I need them to remember how to look again, past the surface, past the noise." He picked up his thermos, poured the last of the coffee into the lid, and offered it to Shaw. "Drink up." Shaw took it and sipped. He grimaced. "Bitter," he said. Luther nodded. "Bitter truth usually is." They both laughed, and for a moment the years fell away no longer. Officer and veteran, not mistake and forgiveness, but two men afloat in understanding. The last rays of sunlight caught on something at Luther's collar, a flash of silver. Shaw pointed. "Why do you still wear them?" Luther reached into his shirt and pulled the dog tags free. They swung gently in the breeze. "Because one day when the sea takes me," he said, "I want it to know whose weight it carries." Shaw didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Luther started the small engine. It rumbled awake like an old friend, with a deep voice, steady and familiar. Shaw coiled the lines and gathered the rods. Neither man looked rushed. As they neared the dock, the lights from shore began to flicker on porch lamps, street posts, the faint warm glow of dinner tables behind curtained windows. The world was winding down. Luther stepped off first. Shaw offered a hand, but the old man waved him off, climbing out with surprising steadiness. His boots landed on the dock with a soft, hollow thud. He paused, turned, and looked at the Evelyn May. "She's held me through more storms than most men ever see," he said. "And she's never once asked who I was." Shaw swallowed hard. "I think she already knows." A small smile tugged at the corner of Luther's mouth, real and fleeting, like a ripple across still water. He slung the rods over his shoulder, thermos in one hand. Then he walked, down the dock, past the marina lights, into the deepening dusk. The sea behind him shimmered in the fading light. It didn't applaud. It didn't explain. But it remembered. and it would carry his name long after the rest of the world had forgotten.